So if you can afford 500, pay that. If you can only afford $100, pay that. I mean, if you make your best good faith efforts to pay what you can afford, then I think that ought to keep most clients out of criminal problems for non-support, and also keep them out of civil contempt because they're making their best efforts. And so, yeah, pay what you can afford is always better than paying nothing.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post. I'm your host, Justin West, and this is where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with people at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions that are out there. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Kirk Stange. He runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Stange Law. How you doing today, Kirk?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Very good. Very good. Well, first things first, as always, let's jump over and take a look at your website. This is the law firm. That is stangelawfirm.com, StangeLawFirm, stangelawfirm.com. As always, we will have a link in the description down below. You can call or schedule a consultation. They have a toll-free number as well, which is 855-805-0595, which kind of rolls off the tongue. It's easy to remember. Before we jump into all of this, though, we're going to run over here and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is National ERC. You may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic recently, and many businesses were forced to shut down or reduce their hours, had supply chain interruptions, and ultimately they suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which basically allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. It's not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It's essentially free money for your business in the form of a tax credit, and you can make advantage of it and spend it however you want on your business. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with gets over $200,000 they can reinvest back into their business that never needs to be repaid. Their calculator is free and they never get a fee or anything unless they secure funding for you. That's nationalerc.org. Second sponsor today is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 to build a professional website where you can host videos and sell products and goods to your clients and your customers, by all means, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you absolutely hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Funnels, the all-in-one website hosting platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. You can actually build an entire website for free through the power of everything that they're doing over at Groove Funnels, which is basically a Swiss Army knife that replaces most of the things you're already doing. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up today, completely free of charge, no credit card required. And I believe you can actually set up to 3 fully functioning websites last time I checked, which is a great deal as well. Again, for more information, visit theattorneypost.com/groove. All right. Well, Kirk, thanks for joining me today. Good to meet you. For those of you who don't know Kirk, which is most of you starting this podcast right now, Kirk is the founding partner of Stange Law. The Stange Law Firm is the second largest family law firm in the country, currently operating in 24 offices across 6 different states. He's received numerous accolades for his legal work, including being named Super Lawyer Honoree by Missouri and Kansas Super Lawyers. Basically since I think it was 2015. He's also been named to the Power List, the top 30 for family law by Missouri Lawyers Media since 2020. He's also written on various family law topics throughout his career, including in 2014 when he solely authored a full-length book through Thomson Reuters, which was App Store Publishing, I believe, called The Prenuptial Agreements Line by Line. You can actually find it on Amazon today. Throughout his career, Kirk has also given back to the legal profession. In 2017, he was recognized by the Missouri Bar for substantial contributions and continuing legal education of Missouri's attorneys. All of that being said, I'm sure I missed something. So, Kirk, first question to you is, what did I miss?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just been kind of a wild ride. I mean, our firm, began in 2007. It was a very small firm in Clayton, Missouri. It's really blown up and grown over time. So it's just, it truly has been kind of a situation where this firm was built from nothing into this large family law to this large family law firm across 6 states. So it's just been quite a ride.
Awesome. Awesome. So now, obviously, I gave a bit of an introduction to you there. I have an idea of what you do. But if I didn't, if you and I got on an elevator and I had no clue who you were, and I turned to you and I said, Kirk, what do you do? What would your answer be? What's your pitch for your firm? What sets you guys apart? Who do you help? Where do you help them? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, we're a multi-state family law firm in 6 states, and so we're unique in that way. I mean, a lot of family law attorneys, they're in one location, typically smaller firms, and we're unique in that we represent men and women. We're in multiple states, we're in multiple counties, and so we have this kind of local flavor, and that we actually have physical offices with attorneys in these different localities where they know the courts, they know the judges, but then we're all part of this bigger, broader firm. So it's a big firm across 6 states with this local flair, this local knowledge as well, which I think is very unique in terms of family law, where there's just not a lot of big firms.
Gotcha. So, general question before we get into some of the specifics. And you have a huge practice. You are very well versed in family law. So I'm going to kind of pick your brain on family law topics that people might have questions about. I also know that you're always looking to bring on new attorneys. So we might actually talk a little bit at the end about the process of running a law firm and hiring new attorneys as well. But what got you into law in the first place? Were you one of those kids, Kirk, that just grew up watching Perry Mason and just knew that this law firm was where you were going? Or was it something you kind of stumbled into? And why family law of all practices?
Yeah, I was always interested in the law. I mean, being a lawyer was something that I thought was intriguing, and I guess I contemplated it. But I grew up from a family that had no lawyers, so I had nobody who could really kind of guide me and tell me how to do it. My dad was a teacher, a high school teacher, so when I went to undergrad, I got a teaching degree in social studies, 7th through 12th grade social studies, and I figured that's what I was going to do. But my last semester at college, I just had the itch, and I figured, look, if I'm going to do this, this would be the time to do it, or I'm going to go into teaching high school. So I took the LSAT on the last possible date I could take it my senior year of college, and lo and behold, I did well enough to get in, and I got into law school. And so, I went, and I still have that teaching certificate, but never used it. In terms of family law, that was just a big accident. I mean, I honestly like constitutional law, like civil rights and stuff like that. But I got my first job out of law school was in a general practice firm. And it was a small firm. It was 4 lawyers. And one of the partners did family law, is what he did. And he was on leave. He got sick at a certain point in time and was out. And they were like, Kirk, we need somebody to handle the family law cases. None of us want to do it. So why don't you give it a shot? And I did it. And, at first it was a little bit scary. I mean, the emotional aspects and, the significance in people's lives, but I got good at it. And then I started getting referrals from other folks asking me to do it. So, I mean, the family law piece was truly just kind of a big accident.
Gotcha. Well, I've often said there's of all the law areas out there, I felt like family law would be one of the hardest ones to go into personally. Like, I don't know if I have the intestinal fortitude to deal with it, because I know you have to deal with, major questions that affect children and families. And, I know it has to be draining at times, but obviously it's important as well. So I'm glad there are people out there like you that are, filling that role, filling that niche. Having a multi-state practice, I'm kind of curious, and I ask this to a lot of my clients or a lot of my guests on the podcast, but obviously we just went through COVID a couple of years ago. At this point, I'd like to think we're out of the woods, but I know a lot of people were really affected during the COVID time. And sometimes they had to change the way they practiced because of regulations from the outside. Maybe it was just internal decisions. Having a multi-state practice, I'm sure you guys had a lot of hurdles to jump through. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys handled the COVID pandemic, the lockdowns, and whether you're carrying a lot of those changes forward in what you're doing, or how's it affected you guys?
It affected us in a great way. I mean, our firm truly, from the time it formed up until COVID, was kind of like a rocket ship. I mean, the firm, we were growing and adding offices, and firm was moving forward, but COVID truly was unique, and it was challenging, and it really did impact us in a lot of ways. I mean, with all these offices, there would be flare-ups in these various offices, and then you got to shut the offices down, send people home, quarantine, and that was something that was happening throughout COVID, and it was always dicey. 6 feet in a 24-hour period where you're near somebody that was infected, so you're always going through this analysis. Do people need to go home and quarantine, or did it not apply? And and the CDC's changing these regulations. So look, that impacted us in a great way. And then, access to the courts. It was really hard to get these cases in front of judges, get them in front of courts. And it was definitely, access was shuttered. It was very hard to get in there. And so clients' cases were delayed. And then one of the biggest things in our area of law too, I should say, is just the consultations. I mean, a big thing in family law is meeting with these clients face to face. They're going through a divorce or family law case. They want to meet somebody, and they want to meet an attorney who cares about them, that understands what they're going through. And so we had to shift to virtual consultations. And that was a huge shift. I mean, frankly, at the beginning of COVID, I didn't even know what Zoom was. I'd never heard of it. And so getting folks to understand how to use the virtual technology, I mean, the attorneys and the potential clients was an issue, but then, getting that emotional aspect to come through, that caring, that compassion, that sensitivity, getting that through a video screen, I think was very tough and very challenging. And so, that piece hurt us as well. There's probably numerous other ways in which I'm forgetting. We're constantly having cleaning crews coming in, disinfecting offices, and yeah, I mean, it was challenging. I think for sure some of the most challenging times in our firm's history.
Gotcha. Yeah, it really is fascinating. And I know that I've talked to lawyers all over the country in different facets of the law. It really is just kind of neat on a and if neat's the word I can use, on a state by state basis, and even region by region, sometimes just how vastly different. Like some of them had to zoom into depositions and hearings, and some of them basically shut down completely. I know an attorney in New York City who is in a building that regularly has, I want to say, and I'm going to biff the numbers now because it's been long enough that I totally spaced the exact number, but it's something like somewhere between 85 and 100,000 people going through this building every single day. And in the height of the pandemic, I think they had like 100 or 200 people in the building, which is just mind blowing. So, anyway, so let me ask you just a couple more general questions, and we're going to start digging into the brain up there, because I have some very particular questions I want to ask you. But I'm sure in your practice of law, building a multifaceted, multi-state law firm, I'm sure you've had some big successes and some big failures. I always like to ask people about their failures first, both because I think failure is a good teacher, and a little dose of humility is good for all of us. And it's only, a failure is a failure only if you don't learn from it. If you learn from it and you carry it forward, obviously it's more of a slow burn win. So, Kirk, can you let my listeners know about a time when in your practice of law, or just at a law school, or whenever it happens to be, somewhere in there, where you experienced what you would consider to be a failure, but what it taught you and how you carry that forward?
I mean, I can go in a couple different directions. I mean, in terms of cases, and then from a business perspective. But I mean, in terms of cases, I think, look, if you're a lawyer and you try cases, as I've done a lot of trials throughout my career, and particularly as the firm was growing, I mean, when the firm was smaller, I did a lot of trials. But look, I mean, I can think of one particular case where, I tried the case, and I felt like I did a great job, and we put all the evidence on, and we presented the witnesses, and we did everything that we felt like we needed to do, and the case just didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, and I felt like the client didn't get a good result, and that's hard, and it's a tough thing, and the best way I can give an analogy of that is, I mean, it does feel like you're a batter, and the bases are loaded and you struck out, and you feel bad when you think about the impact that it had on the individual client. So yeah, I mean, I think understanding one judge is making a decision in a family law case, and that judge might not see it the way you see it, the way your client sees it, is tough. And in terms of a management perspective, learning to manage all these offices and to deal with all the different personalities we have in the firm has definitely been challenging. And that's always a nirvana between being nice and friendly and then being a boss and sort of a disciplinarian in a way, and finding that proper balance, because you can shift too far nice and fun boss, and then maybe at other times you're too much of a disciplinarian. Finding that nirvana has definitely been something I've had to hone and perfect, and then shift it from time to time. There's definitely been times I've erred on both sides.
Gotcha. So what's one of your biggest successes?
Well, I mean, I think the size and the growth of the firm obviously has just been astronomical. And, I never envisioned, that the firm could possibly get this big and grow this fast. I've had a lot of significant trial victories on the same time that I'm very proud of. And that stay with me. And man, there's numerous cases, but I mean, I think of a case where they tried to terminate my client's parental rights. And it was a lengthy trial that I did, and my client I felt like was a good dad and shouldn't have his rights terminated, and we succeeded at trial on that case. So that's definitely one that I found great satisfaction. On the flip end, I felt like we did good there, and we ensured that this dad was going to be able to be involved in his kid's life. And I've never really forgotten that particular case. That one meant a lot to me.
Gotcha. No, I'm sure there have to be some where you just feel like justice was really served, a child was really protected, and I know there's got to be some that are just, yeah, you probably think about them when you're falling asleep sometimes. Like, oh, we all relive the failures in our lives, but, so let me ask you this. If someone wants to work with you, what does the process look like? How does somebody get a hold of your firm? Do you guys do some sort of at least initial basic consultation to kind of give them, a sense of what you guys can and can't do? How does that process play out?
Well, we've got a client intake department at our firm. I mean, I've got a crew of people that are here each and every day, Monday through Friday, and they're taking potential client phone calls, responding to emails and chats, and setting appointments. At our firm, it can be a little bit complex and more complex than other firms because, I mean, in theory, I could have husband calling one of my offices and wife calling another. So quickly as our firm grew, I realized, no, we need to centralize this. It's got to be through an intake department. We can't have conflicts of interest. And so, it's all very centralized where we run it through a conflict check. And then our intake department, in a way is kind of like a matchmaker. So they're trying to figure out, past that, what's the potential client looking for? Do they want a litigator? Are they looking for somebody who is maybe more mediation friendly, more alternative dispute resolution friendly? Some folks want the highest priced attorney they can get with the most experience. So sometimes we get folks that, hey, they want to keep this within a budget. They want an attorney at a lower rate. So a lot of their job is kind of this matchmaking thing in terms of what the potential client's looking for and then trying to square them up with the right attorney. But yeah, we do lots of consultations every day in our offices, and like I say, it's really the lifeblood of our firm, and that's why during COVID it was so challenging when we shift from in person to virtual. There was definitely a huge learning curve in terms of making that work well.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. So if someone decides to work with your firm, I'm sure people come in with preconceived notions about what working with attorneys should look like. What level of service should an individual expect from a family law attorney?
Well, I mean, on a basic level, I mean, a client should expect, and really, it's required that they get competent, communicative, and diligent representation. I mean, that those are the ethical pillars that as attorneys we have to abide by in representing clients. But at our firm, some of the things we do, which I think make us unique, it certainly made us unique early on. Other firms have kind of caught on, but we give clients 24/7 access to their file online through our webpage. So we use a portal and we upload all their documents. And when our firm began doing that, I don't know many other firms where we were at the time who were doing that. That was a huge plus. We give clients cell phone numbers of their attorneys and respond to all phone calls and emails left before 5 p.m. the same day. And, the cell phone access in case of emergency, we definitely impress on our attorneys that family law, I mean, it's not 9 to 5. And so, we give them a high level of access. And, we've always prided ourselves as well. We use the term kind of niche. I mean, we, only doing divorce and family law. I mean, I always impress on our attorneys that we've got to be better than the mean. Right. We've got to prepare more. We've got to know the facts of our cases better. We've got to be more prepared in court. And in our firm, we really push that mentality and impress on our attorneys that, no, you got to be better here. This isn't just fitting in. People come to our firm because they want something better and different and more precise in terms of that family law knowledge. So we definitely demand that here. And we want our clients to get that. I mean, that's our whole goal, is to be here to help them rebuild their life.
Gotcha. So you actually give your cell phones for your attorneys to your clients. Do you find, especially in this modern era when I think people are the millennials and whatever are much more inclined to do things like texting, do you guys ever text with your clients, or are there any risks that come about when you're texting with a client or an attorney?
Yeah, no question. I mean, text is casual, it's informal, and at times it's not thorough enough to understand, what it is that the client's communicating. I mean, I think versus text, it's much better with a cell phone, sync up the firm email through the through the phone and type something a little bit more lengthy. So I've always kind of discouraged text with clients and told them, hey, look, my emails come to my phone as well. So, if you're going to send me something, do it by email. Explain in more detail what it is your question is or what it is your issue is, because in a short little text it's hard to grasp it. It's also hard to print these things and keep them in the client file, because really all communication between the attorney and the client need to end up in the file. Much easier to get emails in a client file. Text harder, but look, sometimes things happen. Cops get called at domestic violence situations. I mean, I'll never forget one time I had a client, a divorce, who got arrested for DWI, and he had one call and he called me. So I went and bailed him out in the middle of the night. I mean, which, DWI wasn't really my practice area at that point in time, but, attorney, you're supposed to be there for your client. You're supposed to be there in their time of need. And, I definitely would rather be called if there was an emergency than things really go south and the client's case get even messier because I couldn't talk them through it, walk them through the proper course of action in their time of need.
Gotcha. You're dealing with families and dissolution of property and reassignment of assets and everything like that. I'm kind of curious, do you guys do anything like estate planning, or, once people have divorced, or do you refer them on so they can kind of start putting the pieces of their life back together? What does the process look like? What aspects of the law do you guys sometimes butt into,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of estate planning, we did add that into our practice area at the firm about a year ago, let's say, something like that. For years we referred that stuff out, and we didn't practice in that area of law, but at a certain point it just seemed unnatural to do it. I mean, when clients go through a divorce and they have an estate plan, I mean, they need to redo that estate plan, and versus referring it out, we did decide to add that into our firm's practice areas. So, it's relatively new for many of our attorneys, but I thought that was an important add-on and ultimately kind of silly to refer it out when we could do it here at our firm. I mean, other areas of law that can kind of, we kind of broadly call family law, but maybe technically it isn't. We do some probate stuff, obviously, guardianships, conservatorships. I mean, a guardianship, we do lots of grandparents who want guardianship over their grandkids. And we've always done those cases from the beginning. So, there's definitely some probate, and with doing the estate planning, we'll probate a will and do that process for our clients too. In terms of criminal law, the only area of law we've ever really handled is criminal non-support. I mean, I've represented lots of clients, let's say in civil contempt on child support cases, and then, the criminal case comes, so we would handle that, because it becomes part and parcel to the family law case. And as well, juvenile cases, obviously when you're doing family law, you end up in the juvenile court. DFS is called hotline calls. So we've always practiced in that area of law as well. But I think that all kind of broadly fits under this umbrella domestic relations law, and it all sort of fits together and overlaps. But other stuff at our firm, we've always, referred out, and we try to refer our clients to great attorneys, but we don't handle those types of cases ourselves.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I would expect. It's good to hear. So let me ask you this. It's actually a question I've had for a long time. I'm kind of curious about. I'm sure that you deal with various kinds of divorces. I'm sure some are no contest on both sides. Some are, no contest, but there's kids. Some are one side is highly contesting. How often is it every single time? I've fortunately never had to go through a divorce, but do divorces go every single time to court? Do they go before a judge? Do they sometimes stay out of the court? If they do go to court, how important is the judge that's assigned? Does it make a difference? Is that something you can play a part in? How does all that play out?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of pieces there, but in terms of your first question, I mean, look, I mean, most divorces settle. I think most family law attorneys would say that. I mean, most do settle, but the issue is, does it settle quick? Does it settle fast? Or is it one of these circumstances where it settles, but it might take months, or it might take more than a year to get there? And so, that's really the question. And the difficulty with divorce law is this. I mean, contested versus uncontested, there's some preciseness to the term that a lot of clients miss. I mean, an uncontested divorce means both parties want a divorce. Okay. So if both parties want it, it's uncontested, but that doesn't mean it's easy, because if you still have to divide all the property and debt, If there's kids, you got to decide child custody, and then child support, and then spousal maintenance, which is called alimony in some states, can come into play, and then attorney's fees. I mean, who's paying? But they each paying their own. There's one party paying the others, and so the devil gets to be in the details. So even in an uncontested divorce, where both parties want it, they might disagree on the details. And truly, the way I've always seen it is it's just kind of the level of disagreement. I mean, some folks might agree on 90% of it, but 10% can hang the whole thing up. You have to have a complete and final deal. In terms of the judge, look, judge makes a big difference. I mean, you see it in kind of these cases, going before the Supreme Court. You got liberal judges, conservative judges, you got moderate judges, and in family law, I don't know that matters so much, but you have judges who like 50-50 custody. I think that's a good starting point. I've seen judges who don't believe that. They believe kids should be predominantly in one home. There's some judges that are very pro maintenance or alimony. They think it's a long-term marriage. One party makes more, hey, they're going to have to pay. I've seen some judges are much more bootstrap people, thinking, hey, go get a job. You can work. You shouldn't get alimony and live off of your ex-spouse. And you could just kind of go down the litany on these issues. But, obviously there's statutory guidelines, there's case law guidelines, but judges still do have a lot of discretion. And so for sure, one judge could decide a case differently than the others. And then in terms of what judge you get, that's going to be based on the court, the locality. There's normally a presiding judge or a head judge who assigns these cases, or maybe the clerk randomly assigns them. And there's times clients can take a change of judge and try to get in front of somebody else, but 100% a judge can definitely make a difference.
Gotcha. I had another question that stirred up, and it just went off the cliff. It does that sometimes. It might come back to me in a minute. I might ask you another question about that. It's like right on the tip of my tongue too. Oh well. We were talking a minute ago about dividing up property. I'm curious, like when you're going through property, when you're going through assets, does it matter, for instance, like how something is titled, like if the house is only in the husband's name or the car is only in the wife's name or whatever? And is it very common for people to try to hide assets that their significant other maybe never knew about? How do you solve that if they're doing that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is the first question. I mean, most states are now equitable division states, which means, you look at the date of marriage forward. So from the date of marriage to the date of divorce, if the asset was acquired, it's presumed marital property. Now there's some exceptions, and this can vary a little bit by state, whether it be a gift or inheritance. Somebody brought it into the marriage, it's their separate property. But I mean, to answer your question about whether the titling matters, I mean, if it was acquired during marriage, then it probably doesn't matter much how it's titled. Now, if somebody had something before the marriage, it's in their own name, and then they get married, let's say, and they never title it in their other spouse's name. Like, take somebody owns a home before marriage, it's only in their name, they get married, they don't title it in their spouse's name. I mean, that's a good fact, is it's separate property. You didn't transmute it into marital property. But fundamentally the question is, was it acquired during marriage? If it was, then the way it's titled is definitely not dispositive. And then what was you had a second question there as well?
It was about whether or not you ever come into situations where one of the spouses is hiding assets, whether they hid them from their own spouse the whole time, or, they're just trying to not say everything that they have available. And do you have a process for, I guess, sussing that out?
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, I think it's normally rare, but it can happen for sure. It is a family law attorney, this goes into that duty of diligence, where you got to be diligent to try to locate all marital assets. Look, I mean, ways you can figure it out when somebody's doing it. And sometimes you see the stuff on the tax returns. There'll be clues in the tax returns that there's something out there, that wasn't disclosed. Social media can be important. I mean, maybe somebody has a new boat, they're bragging about it, and they put it on their social media page. Something like that. Sometimes other witnesses can come forward. I know, a lot of times private investigators can help do an investigation to locate hidden assets. So it can happen. I would say it's normally pretty rare. Courts frown on it when somebody does it. For sure, it's not a good thing to do it. And if somebody gets busted, it normally looks pretty poor, in the eyes of the court if they do it. But yeah, I'd say rare, but it does happen sometimes.
Gotcha. Oh, I mean, I guess it's one of those things that I'm sure does come up at times. I had a question that somebody had written down for me at one point, and they asked about the golden goose, and whether or not individuals should think twice before killing the golden goose. What is, for our listeners, the golden goose, and should people think twice?
Yeah, I mean, the golden goose is typically the breadwinner in a marriage. So the person who's making the money is making the bucks. And look, in some marriages, it could be both parties. Both parties are working. They're both gainfully employed. They're both making money. But in some cases, it's one person who's predominantly bringing in the income. And what the other party has to be careful of is sort of savagely attacking that golden goose, right? I mean, if you go after the golden goose and you're raising scandalous allegations against them that are frivolous, if you're making accusations that have no merit, in an attempt to attack that person, then I think what some individuals can forget is like, hey, if you're asking for child support from this person and you attack them and you reduce their income, right, you might end up getting less child support, and if you wanted spousal maintenance from this person, and then you're sort of going after them in a very aggressive manner with a bunch of scandalous allegations that maybe could affect their employment, their ability to get a job, their reputation in the community, stuff like that. If you reduce their income, then you might ruin your maintenance case or make it worse. So I think, look, if there's legit allegations, if somebody's really committing domestic violence, somebody's committing a crime, they're doing something that could impact the kids, then, those allegations need to be raised. But at times, unfortunately, it can be a circumstance where there's nothing there, but one party's just mad about the divorce, so they just start flinging mud, and then they kind of forget that the flinging of that mud, if it sticks, it could be like a boomerang that ends up hurting their own case. So folks need to be careful before they do that.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense, and good advice. I think it's humane advice in general. Try not to tear people down unnecessarily, even if it's someone that you no longer can stand.
That's totally true.
Some famous carpenter once said, if you love those that love you, what profit is there in that? So so you deal with assets and division. We were just talking about affecting somebody's income, and eventually that becomes child support and sometimes alimony. And I'm sure people are oftentimes, nobody likes paying money, period. Nobody likes paying money. That's just truism in life, right? But what should somebody do if they wind up in a situation where they're all of a sudden unable to pay for child support, if they're supposed to be giving child support or spouse support to their spouse?
Well, it's important to hire an attorney right away. That's a big key. And then, the other key is paying what a party can afford. Where I talked about criminal non-support in the past, being at one area of criminal law that we do at our firm. And the laws can vary by state, but let's just say hypothetically, the individual is supposed to pay $1,000 a month in child support and they lose their job. Okay, some could be tempted to pay nothing, and that's where you can get into felony land. So what I've always told clients, and I think most competent attorneys would tell a client, is like, okay, so if you legitimately can't afford the 1,000, what can you afford, and pay that. So if you can afford 500, pay that. If you can only afford $100, pay that. I mean, if you make your best good faith efforts to pay what you can afford, then I think that ought to keep most clients out of criminal problems for non-support, and also keep them out of civil contempt because they're making their best efforts. And so, yeah, pay what you can afford is always better than paying nothing. And then, seek to modify. If the number is too high and it's just not palatable anymore based on the current circumstances, pay what you can afford for the time being, and then seek to modify and lower that amount. But, unfortunately, some individuals don't do that. They sort of put their head in the sand. They just don't pay, and they don't seek to modify. And then, criminal non-support, civil contempt, can arise. And that can be very hard to dig out from under once that process begins civilly and criminally.
Gotcha. Is there a best practice when it comes to paying for either alimony or child support? Like, should you pay with cash? Should you pay with a credit card? Should you pay with does it go through the courts? This is things that I don't even know. And
Sure.
and do people ever pay in kind, like maybe with diapers or formula or something like that?
Yeah, well, it's always, look, it's gonna vary by state, the exact process, and different governmental entities have different names in different states. But if you could pay it through the state, at times some folks don't like that because particularly if they've been garnished or something like that. But look, that provides verification that the payments are being made. So that that's a good thing. So in most instances, even though it's sort of a headache, being garnished or paying it through the state, that provides that certainty. But what I've seen some folks do, which is good faith, and I understand why they would want to do it, but they will give cash, versus paying it. And then there's no record. And then the party who received the cash says they didn't get it, or it wasn't for child support, it was for something else. I've seen this with a lot of unmarried dads, right? They might get a lady pregnant. The lady has a baby, and they want to help. And so then they want to do nice things like buy formula, buy diapers, give cash, but then there's no record of it. So then if the state child support enforcement authorities come after them, it's really hard to prove those things and get credit for it. So, if you're not paying through the government, a check is always the next best thing. And then you put in the memo line child support. So there's just no ambiguity about what it's for. Because, individuals, where a lot of individuals get in trouble is with these back child support arrears, and it can be overwhelming. And then interest gets tacked on, and then you get criminal implications. So yeah, pay through the state. If that's not possible because there is no case, there is no proceeding, then definitely pay by check and write child support in the memo line has always been my advice to clients in these kinds of cases.
That's an interesting, again, things I hopefully will never have to deal with, but it is something that people deal with on a regular basis. So it's good to know. I was talking earlier about, millennials and texting and everything else. And I've heard horror stories of social media and how it can impact a divorce, or it can impact a family law case in general. Can you talk a little bit about social media and how it plays a role, especially as it grows and becomes such a ubiquitous part of our lives? How does it affect what you do, and how does it affect your clients, good and bad?
Yeah, I mean, social media could create a lot of evidence in a divorce or family law matter. So I just think anybody going through these kinds of cases has to be cautious in terms of what they're posting and what they're putting up there. Look, I mean, some people put up photos of it could be inappropriate behavior, things that they're doing that isn't the best. Sometimes individuals can boast on social media. I don't know, in a lot of ways, people kind of put that perfect snow globe life up online and can brag and boast and maybe puff and make it sound better than it actually is. And so, those kinds of things can make it real tough as well. So there just needs to be some caution. Some clients get it and they know what's appropriate to post and what isn't appropriate to post. But some folks don't. And some folks might even vent about their case, vent about their ex, maybe, post things about the other party. And that is always obviously taboo. There could be no talking about the case or the other party and stuff like that. So it just has to be a great deal of caution. Some clients can navigate it. Some folks might need to take a break from social media during their case. It might be better to just sort of shut it down until it's over. But I know in this day and age, that is tough because people are almost always so tied into their phones and their social media. And so I guess the final bit, I just say, think twice before posting. Once you post it, it's up there. So be sure you want that out there.
Well, maybe that's the happy medium though for texting with your attorneys. Just slide into their DMs, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, some clients might be tempted to do that as well, but yeah, definitely lawyers should probably stay off the social media contact with their clients, particularly while a case is pending.
I think it's fair. I almost wonder if there's like an ethical implication there, or at least there could be, but I don't know. Let me ask you this, and I'm kind of curious about this as well, especially because, when the process of a divorce begins, things aren't finalized. So if one spouse has been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years and whatnot, she's looking at going out into the world and having to get a job, and she may be getting child support. She may be getting alimony down the road when things are settled and the dust is settled, but she may not be able to afford going out on her own, especially right at the beginning of the divorce. Maybe family's not nearby. Does it happen? And is it advisable or unadvisable for a couple, even as they're undergoing a divorce, to live together? I've heard of this happening before, but I'm kind of curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a question that a lot of individuals ask in these situations, and it's complex. And look, I've heard some lawyers kind of paint, more black and white rules. I mean, to me, this is much more gray than black and white. So, I mean, I think the predominant question in my mind is, could people peacefully coexist in the home, during that divorce or family law matter? Is that possible? Some folks are able to do that and be peaceful, keep the emotions in check. There's not yelling and screaming and arguing and domestic violence and stuff like that. Right. But if there's a history of domestic violence, if folks aren't capable of doing that, and there's going to be violence and the cops are going to be called, all these things, obviously somebody's got to go in those circumstances. And so to me, that's the predominant question. Now, I've heard some attorneys say is the dads, well, if you move out of that home, and then the mom has the kids the majority of the time in the interim, could that set a precedent that makes it hard for the dad to get 50-50 custody or to get custody himself? And yeah, I mean, that could be a potential counter. It could vary, very much by state. On the flip end, though, if the dad's going to stay and there's going to be violence and the cops are going to be called, man, that might hurt more.
Yeah.
So you have to definitely weigh those things. I think it's complex. Obviously, if somebody wants the home and they move out, it's going to be hard to get it back. And so that, that's another piece too. But if a party doesn't even want the home anyway, would prefer to sell it, doesn't care, then that would weigh in favor of moving out as well. But I think this is very fact specific, and definitely a client should sit down with their attorney and go through this in great detail. But definitely, if there's domestic violence or significant risk of it, not a good idea to have the two parties in the same home.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I remember my question from earlier, because we were talking about judges, and I was just curious because one of the questions I asked, and I don't know if I got a full answer or not, is what control do you have when it comes to a judge? Can you get a change of venue? Do you, and maybe this is inside baseball beyond where you want to go, but are you able to judge shop? Like if you have, and I'm just going to vary on a case by case basis, I'm sure, but let's say a judge that prefers to give full custody to the mother more often than not, you're representing the father, or you're representing the mother, right? Does that change the venue for you at all? Do you do anything in that situation, or you just have to roll with the punches?
Well, I mean, for sure, it's definitely something a lawyer ought to think about, ought to consider, and definitely it's something I have in my cases throughout the years. I mean, it's tough if two people reside in the same county in the same state. Then oftentimes, I mean, there's not, typically not really a choice in terms of where you got to file. If they're in the same county in the same state, you got to file in that county. But where you could really see that variance is, let's say at the time of the divorce, husband's in one county and wife is in another. Well, then theoretically, you got a choice about where to file this case. And then, the statutes and the details of the case can matter in those circumstances. But certainly if there's a choice, and one county tends to lean more 50-50 and one, tends to lean not so much, then the party might shop. Also, if the parties are in different states, then you can get into a real issue about what state, the case ought to be in. And then, there's statutes there that control the Hague Convention, that can be international too, if parties are in different countries. So, yeah, I mean, there can be quite a bit of variance. Once you get into the county, if they're in the same county, here in Missouri, where I've predominantly practiced, you're entitled to one automatic change of judge early in the case, but then you're randomly reassigned. And so then you don't know who you're going to get the second go around. And past that, an attorney can file a motion to change a judge for cause, but those are very hard, and in my experience, very rarely work unless there's a significant basis. And so then a party might just upset the judge and alienate the judge in a way. And so you got to be very cautious with that. But certainly, I think any competent family law attorney, if there's choices, is weighing those choices for sure, because a judge becomes like the jury in a family law case. So you got to think about it, you got to contemplate it. If there's a choice, you got to present that to the client and get their feedback.
Just out of curiosity, how do you know a judge's mentality? Is this based purely on A, your experience with the judge in the past, and or B, talking with other attorneys and just getting a feel like, hey, Judge so-and-so, how do they do this? Or, how do you even, if you can share that knowledge, maybe that's too inside as well, but like, how do you know? Like, how do you figure that out?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think in a large respect, obviously there's a great deal of speculation going on no matter what, because you're kind of trying to read into the judge's mind, and the judge might have done something in a prior case for a reason that's totally different than what we think, right? And we're not inside the judge's mind. We're not a fly on the wall in their brain where we know for sure. But yeah, look, I mean, definitely prior cases is definitely something that I've always relied on. And if I tried multiple cases, been in front of a judge on a particular issue, multiple times, and I would rely on that. I go to other attorneys in my firm, if I haven't been before a certain judge, to see if somebody else has been before the judge. And yeah, certainly as well, attorneys call around, talk to their friends who are attorneys and say, hey, you've been in front of Judge X or Y or Z, and what do you think of them? And how do they come down on X, Y, or Z issues? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of banter with it. But it's kind of like picking a jury, when it's jury selection, lawyers are asking questions, trying to get inside the jurors' minds, and, we'll strike certain people and keep others. And sometimes you still get it wrong, because nobody's inside that juror's mind, nobody's inside of that judge's mind, but you're trying to get at tendencies, past cases.
That makes
Sometimes
sense.
reported opinion, you can look at reported opinions too. That's the other way. I mean, do you get on the research software, type that judge's name and maybe see some of the cases that they had that went up on appeal. And that's the other thing I've done. And I know most good attorneys do that too.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I've dug in a lot here about the family law side of what you do, but you're obviously a successful businessman who runs a very successful firm. So I want to put the shoe on the other foot for a few minutes here and talk about your firm as your firm. Stange Law bears your name, founded in 2007, I believe.
Correct.
So obviously you guys are growing fast. What are we, 2007, 17, what, year 16 right now? And you're the second largest family law practice in the country. That's crazy. What are some of the factors that influence that? What led you guys to the success that you're having?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things at Stange Law Firm that we did is we got in on internet advertising early. So while lots of other lawyers, were doing the phone book and doing radio and TV and really doing traditional marketing, working on word of mouth, internet marketing was a huge part of the firm's success. We've got a great web page, and we've had it for a long time. And we had a huge web page when some firms had no web page at all. And over the course of 16 years, that web page has generated a lot of authority. It's got lots of great content, and we can go into a market with this web page and put up the local info on our new offices, and our web page will rank high quick. And so that's been a huge key in terms of our growth and our expansion. And in a way, it's been kind of under the radar because versus we've done some radio and some TV through time, but versus pounding the radio and the TV like some firms do, we've really worked it online, and a lot of people haven't really. I think competitors haven't seen us coming and don't really understand how the firm has worked. I mean, the other big thing that I've spent a lot of time in over the history of the firm, and I'd say I have pretty unique knowledge at this point in time compared to most other attorneys is, I've run my own Google AdWords for years, run Facebook ads, Twitter ads, ads on Microsoft. I mean, I have great understanding of how to set up these ads, how to target these ads. And, I have well more than a decade of it. And, if I didn't want to be an attorney, I could probably do a marketing company and do people's Google AdWords and Facebook ads and set these things up. And, that's been huge too, because a lot of attorneys, when you pay a marketing company to do that stuff, you got to pay these folks a handsome sum to do it. And the fact that we're able to do it and I can do it internally. And I've got people now who help me and can give me ideas and help me with it. But, that online marketing has just been the big key and the big powerful engine that has made this firm, I think, grow as fast as it has.
Gotcha. I just flashed on the screen for people who wanted to know, but I'll ask you anyway for the people who are just listening to the audio version of this. Where do you guys operate? What states are you in?
Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then Indiana. And we began in St. Louis, Missouri. I mean, that's where the firm began. I mean, that's where I've predominantly practiced, and that's where it all began. But over time, it was populating the counties around St. Louis County where the firm began, and we kind of went around those counties, and then we started to work our way outside, and it was just kind of a gradual thing. It went to Springfield, Illinois, the capital of Illinois, which wasn't too far away. It was our first dive out of St. Louis, and it worked. So, from there it was Columbia, Missouri, and then before it was Kansas City, and we've kind of grown from there. I mean, at this point in time, I'd say our firm, I mean, I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but we almost do as much business in Kansas City as we do in St. Louis. I mean, the firm's growth in Kansas City has been huge and tremendous. And, I've got 3 full-time offices out there, and I mean, we chug in Kansas City and in the state of Kansas. And then, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Indiana have been kind of the newer ventures, if you will, and yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride, and seems like there's a big need because when we come, it seems like the clients come quick. So we're obviously filling a void in places where folks are looking for, a niche family law firm that represents men and women coming into their town. There seems to be a huge need.
Gotcha. So what's it like to work at Stange Law? What sets you guys apart as an employer? How many attorneys are you working with all these law offices?
Yeah, I mean, we're somewhere between 40 and 50 attorneys at the moment as we're sitting here today, and we're continuing to grow and expand. I mean, I think the great thing about working at Stange Law Firm is if somebody wants to do domestic relations law, family law, they can do that here, and they can just focus on being a lawyer. I mean, attorney here doesn't have to worry about marketing. They don't have to worry about running the business side of the firm, conducting job interviews, making bank deposits, dealing with the taxes, the headaches of running a firm. I know, a lot of the attorneys who work for us tell me, they were solo practitioners, and it kind of had roller coaster feel in terms of the way their firm operated, right? They might have a good month, they get some cases, and then right, things slow down and they're making no money, and they still got to pay their rent, their utilities, their malpractice insurance, their paralegal, their secretary, all these things. And it's just like this roller coaster. But here, an attorney can truly come here. Cases come in, they come in quick, and they can just be an attorney and not worry about the business aspects of the firm so much, which I think is just a huge plus for anybody working at our firm.
Gotcha. So side question, you guys are in about 6 states, I think you listed a minute ago. Are you looking to expand to new states? Are you looking to grow in the states that you're in? Are you guys hiring right now? And if so, do you offer good salary, good benefits, all that stuff? Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, well, we're definitely hiring. We're always hiring. We're always looking to expand. And so we're always looking for folks who want to do family law, or maybe they've done family law in the past, and this is the area of law that they think is for them. So we're always looking for lawyers, always looking for attorneys, we're always looking for top talent, and we get top talent from all sorts of avenues, whether it be somebody who's done family law and loves it and just wants to come here and be an attorney, to folks who may be lawyers, they haven't done family law but they want to learn how to do it. So we've got a good mix of folks on both those ends. In terms of growth, we're going to continue to expand, and we're going to continue to expand quickly. And again, as we go into these new localities, there's just a tremendous need. I mean, one of the biggest recent examples is we went to Omaha, Nebraska about a year ago, and we already have 2 attorneys there. And then, we went in Lincoln, Nebraska in October of last year, and we're already busy there. So there's this need. And in seeing that need, seeing that clients, they welcome a firm like ours coming in, we're filling a void. Again, we represent women, we represent men, which is a great thing. And seeing that folks embrace that and sort of welcoming us coming in by virtue of coming in and hiring us, then we're going to continue to move forward and continue to grow our firm.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So if somebody was in, I don't know, Oregon, you're nowhere near there, but they want to operate under the Stange Law banner, more or less. Is that something that works? Is that too far out? How does that play? Because I run my own company, but my company is mostly just me and a sales guy and an assistant. So I have a very, very low overhead sort of business for what I do, but I can't even imagine juggling 40, 50 attorneys or whatever, like how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see, I mean, if you look at the map, we've kept it pretty contiguous to date, So I mean, all the states we're in all kind of line up to each other. From a management perspective, I thought that made a lot of sense. It's easy to hop in a car and get somewhere, or fly one place and go somewhere else. So we've tried to keep things fairly contiguous. And, in a general sense, the idea would be to stick with that. I mean, theoretically, we don't have to. We originally, for a long time, kind of build ourselves as a Midwest divorce and family law firm. And, we shifted that terminology to a multi-state firm. So there'd be nothing stopping us from going into a totally different state. It'd just be, from a logistical standpoint, travel standpoint, be a little more complicated. We don't, one of the things we have never done, and I don't imagine we ever would, or I don't know, I mean, maybe we might, but we've just never done it, is like, if it's an attorney who's got a practice and they just want to fall under our umbrella and we just kind of come in and buy them out, We've never done that. What we've always done is we go into the market, we find office space, we rent it, we hire an attorney, we begin with no cases, and we run the marketing, and then we put all the info on the webpage. The webpage rises to the top, and the clients come. And that's always the way we've done it. Other attorneys have then shut down their practice and came and joined us, but we've never done the thing of like mergers and acquisitions or acquiring other businesses or something like that. With our webpage, our marketing, we don't really have to do that because we come in there with that webpage, and we almost always know it's going to happen quick. It's going to happen quick. The clients will come.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's very cool to have that kind of power, and to just kind of know that you can go in there and set up shop and fill the gap, so to speak. What's if somebody decides to work with you, what's the path for growth for an employee with you, for an attorney or whatnot? What does their trajectory look like? Are you hoping these guys are with you in 40 years and some of them have joined the masthead, or what does that process look like?
Well, I mean, I think anytime you make a hire, you're hoping somebody's going to be with you in 40 years. I mean, that's always a plan. That's always a hope. It's always a desire. Obviously it doesn't always happen. But I've got lots of attorneys who've been with me for a long time, folks who came in and rose up through the ranks. I mean, the managing partner at our firm, Kelly Davidzook, began working for me right out of law school. I think about 12 years ago, was a brand new attorney, had never handled a case, never been in court. And she worked her way up to being the managing partner of the firm, which is, the person really who is the engine of the firm in a lot of ways, somebody I rely on, tremendously, and has just really been somebody who's been godsend to me and a godsend to the firm in terms of having that firm, run and operate at times when maybe I wasn't around. So look, somebody can rise from the bottom like that all the way up to the top. But certainly we have some attorneys who come and they don't do family law and they go, and we've had some attorneys come and they join other firms and stuff like that. But I think we got a good mix of folks who've been with us for a very, very long time. Even our director of administration, Rebecca Terry, was my first full-time employee, and she's been with me now, I mean, more than 15 years. And so definitely folks been here a long time.
Nice. Do you work with law schools ever? Do you go in and how do you recruit talent, especially on such a large, or especially if you're going into a new area? How do you recruit talent there?
Yeah, I think recruiting is one of the most challenging pieces of our law firm, and I would imagine other law firms as well, although I'm not in other law firms. But things I've seen that have happened over the last several years, which has made it, I think, challenging, is law school classes have shrunk. For a while there was a viewpoint that there's too many attorneys out there, depressing salaries. So I think a lot of law schools have really decreased the number of people they let in. Bar passage rates are tough in some localities. I know Missouri, the last bar passage rate, it was somewhere in the 40-something%. And so a lot of folks then get through not passing the bar. So that's made it challenging. I think in this economy with inflation and market stuff, student loans, a lot of these attorneys come with a lot of student loans. That's made it challenging. But in terms of what we do, things that have helped, I mean, I have internal recruiters that work at my firm. I've got employees who all they do is recruit. So they're working LinkedIn Recruiter. I think that's a big key. Obviously, we post job ads on all kinds of job boards, and we definitely post jobs through law schools. A lot of that's been kind of centralized in various platforms that these law schools use now. So we definitely post through law schools as well. But I just think the biggest change has been with less lawyers coming out, this economy. I think one of the things law firms have to do is recruit. And you've got to go out and get that talent. It's a different day and age. I mean, early in the history of the firm, I could post a job ad and there would just be, where you get 100 attorney resumes. And it's very different today, where you gotta go out there and get that talent. Otherwise, it can be, I think it can be very tough for a lot of law firms.
Gotcha. Well, Kirk, I've taken up a lot of your time already, so I don't want to take up too much more. I've got a couple final questions for you. Well, question number one, and then I'll jump into my closing questions, is you're the second biggest family law firm in the country right now. What's next?
Well, I mean, I think as we look into 2024, we're going to look to go into some new states for sure. And so there'll definitely be some expansion in 2024, and we're looking to solidify some of our newer offices. We're still pretty new in Nebraska, and we're also up in Chicago now, and so we're kind of looking to solidify some of the stuff that we have going as well. But we're just going to keep marching forward as we continue to see the need. I mean, if I go into a market and we see there's no need for us, there's no market demand, I might think differently. But as I go in and there's that demand and the clients are coming, then my vision is to keep moving forward. I mean, we're helping people rebuild their lives. There's obviously a big need. A lot of clients who want a law firm that is a niche family law firm versus maybe a very small family law firm or general practice firm. So as we see that need, we're going to keep moving forward. And we take great pride, like I said as well, that we represent men and women in almost an equal ratio. And we just want to be there to help people through the hard times they're going through.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Well, here in a minute, I'm going to ask you my two questions that I think my listeners like the most. And those questions are, A, if we were to go back in time, meet a young Kirk fresh out of law school, what advice would you give yourself and why? And of course, by extension, anybody else maybe looking to start their own law firm, or maybe just, coming out of law school, what advice would you give yourself other than the obvious, which of course is buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K, right? Outside of that advice, what advice would you give yourself and why? And then the second question is, if I gave you my pen, now this pen is actually from a Benedictine monastery, kansasmonks.org. Maybe I'll put a link in them down there below as well. But this pen may or may not have been blessed by one of the priests at this monastery. But I found that it can magically change laws on the books. It can strike laws that are on the books right now. It can edit laws that are on the books, or it can add a new law. So if I were to loan you my magical pen here, my blessed pen from the monks, and you could make one change. It can be big with nationwide ramifications. It can be focused, like one of the states you guys are in that just drives you nuts, or it can be, for lack of a better word, petty. Some law that forces you guys to fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week. What law would you change and why? While you're percolating on those ideas, I'm going to jump over one more time, take a look at your website. Again, I'm talking with Kirk Stange. He is the masthead at Stange Law Firm. That is stangelawfirm.com. Link in the description down below, as always. If you want to schedule a consultation, visit the website, click the button up at the top. You can also call toll-free 855-805-0595. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and to see those articles rank locally and nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours, for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and permanently. This is essentially guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. Visit rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page 1 in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more clients with rankwithnews.com. All right, so we travel back in time, Kirk, and we see a young Kirk fresh out of law school, and you're able to talk with him without creating some sort of a weird, bizarre time loop that forces everyone into, a Doctor Strange situation or whatever. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously tough and complicated, but I guess, look, I mean, I think, as an attorney and as somebody who now runs a big business, I mean, one of the things I think that I did early in my career is I made a lot of decisions based on my heart versus my head. And I think they're both important. You have to weigh, your heart and your head. And it's kind of like this nirvana thing. It's kind of like being the nice boss and the strict disciplinarian and finding kind of this nirvana. But I think early in my career, I was young, I was naive. I had a lot of great ideas as an attorney. I had a lot of great ideas in terms of running a firm and setting up a firm. But I think that there was a lot of, some of the mistakes I made were based on just being a little bit naive, a little bit not street smart. And so I think as an attorney and as a business person, you got to balance your heart versus your head. They're both very important. But I think, candidly, if I made some of the decisions less on the heart, a little bit more in the head, you're going to make mistakes, but maybe I would have made a few less.
There you go. I mean, that's good advice. There is a place for heart, and it's very, very important, but there is a place for cold business logic too.
Unfortunately, because that's the thing, I mean, it's like you can love all your clients, you can love all your employees, and you always, I mean, for me, I always want what's best for all of them, and I always have, but then at times, there's, whether it's your client, whether it's employees, there's certain sort of tangible things happening that you can't be blind to and that you can't overlook. And so, at times, I mean, the heart's important, but you can't discount what you see, what you hear, what's right before you too. And so you definitely got to balance those two things.
Gotcha. That's great advice. Magic pen time. I give you my pen here, Kirk. You can do anything you want with it. You can make one change. What are you going to change?
I could give you all kinds, honestly. I could go on for hours on it. But the one change, and this can vary by state, but there's this thing called the putative father registry that deals with unmarried dads. And so if an unmarried dad thinks, that, hey, this lady's having a kid and I think I'm the dad, they've got to put themselves on the putative father registry. At least in Missouri where I'm at, you got to do it within X number of days. Otherwise the mom theoretically could put that baby up for adoption, and then the dad has no rights to the kid. In a lot of states, the putative father registry, I think, is harsh. I think the timelines are rigid, and I think a lot of these unmarried dads out there are unsophisticated. They don't know the law. They never even heard what is a putative father registry. So to me, I would think that there should be, some amendments to statutes. I understand. I mean, I'm very pro adoption. If the parents can't keep the kid, can't take the kid, I get it. But I just think, there should be a mechanism that is a little bit easier for some of these unmarried dads to navigate in terms of the putative father registry. Because it's a harsh deal, and most have no clue what it is and what it even means.
Gotcha. Well, that's great advice and a great concept, a great thing to change. My tagline for my company or my podcast: if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And I think it's a real shame when people go into things not knowing what their rights are. Obviously, if someone out there is in the area where Stange Law operates, if you are in Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, or Indiana currently, and you are facing a divorce issue or a custody issue, always know what your rights are. Always seek out a competent attorney in those areas. And of course, it sounds like Kirk's got a great firm. Kirk, I always like to give my guests the final word. Is there any parting words of wisdom, any last advice or last thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of attorneys out there, one of the advices I always give attorneys is just be humble and hardworking. If you're humble, you've got humility. That goes a long way toward having a good career. I mean, humbleness is, I think, vital, and then just working hard. Working your tail off, working harder than others, putting in the time, whether it be learning how to try cases, reading statutes, reading case law. It just makes a huge difference. So I just think in terms of attorneys, humble and hardworking is everything.
All righty. I think that sums it up nicely. I like that. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me today for this podcast with Kirk Stange of Stange Law. This has been The Attorney Post. And as always, though we do deal with a lot of legal issues on this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you do have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, again, if you're in any of those states, Kirk and his firm seem like they would be a wonderful resource. So as always, we'll again have the links and the phone numbers in the description down below. You can reach out to them and at least get the ball rolling. Because again, if you don't know what your rights are, you don't have any rights at all. So I'll always be looking for that. Also, it sounds like he's hiring. And I actually was clicking around here while we were talking, and he actually has a site on his website, stangelawfirm.com/careers. If you are fresh out of law school, or maybe you're a little seasoned, but you're looking to, again, be under the aegis, you can visit that. I'm just looking around. I see Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Topeka, Kansas is where I grew up, actually. Clayton, Missouri, Lee Summit, Lenexa, Lawrence, Kansas, home of the Jayhawks, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, Manhattan, Kansas, home of K-State, right? Indianapolis, Columbia, Missouri. I just drove through that last week. My wife lives out in Pennsylvania. So there's a lot of them on here. So if you're looking to be a lawyer or an attorney, you want to get into the family law space, it sounds like Stange Law Firm might be a wonderful place to at least begin your career. And who knows, maybe even 30, 40 years later, you get to be on the masthead too. Who knows? If you guys are watching this podcast on YouTube, as always, we appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. Feel free to comment down below if you learned anything in this podcast, or if you have any questions for the attorney that you'd like him to ask as well, or like him to answer. As always, if you're watching or listening on any of the podcast repositories, whether that's Apple's iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you listen, we appreciate a like, subscribe, a share, a rating, whatever it happens to be. If you know someone who could use this information, please feel free to share this podcast with them. And until next time, this is Justin West reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys, and bye-bye.